software gave me a near finished product. So to me, it was just listening through, fixing little things, suggesting, or showing where we needed to redo a few lines. But this one has been to go from where we had with Derek, where we were there every moment of the process, and recording it and editing and doing all the marks ourselves, to just kind of doing almost a quality control over it. It was a very different process. So there are technical things that we had to do afterwards, in terms of getting into the different services. I think Audible puts out a sheet of their requirements for how to what you have to submit to them. So I just made sure the audio conformed to that. Did some little sweetening here and there, little EQ, little compression. But other than that, it was just, I kind of got to experience the story myself in real time, just listening through, which I've been able to do with all the other ones. I've kind of been able to experience it with the reader as I'm recording. And so I didn't let them, when we did the in-person ones, I didn't want them to spoil future parts of it. But I think John got to see my quizzical looks halfway through books with in the other ones.
Yeah.
And Nora, again, for the writers who are in the audience, when you go into one of these projects, always be thinking long term. You might be thinking that it's a singular project and you just need the right technician for this one project. That might not be the case. You might actually be beginning a long-term relationship. And the trust factor, knowing you're dealing with the right professional, the confidence, the work product are also critical. I had no idea in 2017 that Matt and I would do 3 books together. I had no concept that the 3rd book was going to be done without any of us being able to communicate with each other while the process was ongoing. And yet it worked. And it worked because over that period of 3 years, we had together recorded dozens and dozens of chapters of books. And so we understood how we worked. We could listen to what the product was. So when you're beginning that relationship, don't sell it short, and enter into it with the possibility that you might be entering into a long-term professional creative process with another person. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm amazed you were all able to do this in different places and not being in the same room and not being able to bounce stuff off in real time.
Yeah.
But somehow it made it all work. And I'm amazed also that you were able to write this thing in the middle of a pandemic. It's so timely. Although I know there is one thing in the book that is outdated, or was, but at the time it was correct. Why don't you tell that story, John?
So when I wrote the book, and I came up with the idea on Easter Sunday, which was April 12th. And I had an idea of a book kicking around in my head. And a few days earlier, I had read an op-ed piece in the Washington Post where I think it was a Columbia University professor said, write it down. We're in the midst of a pandemic. This will pass. Keep a diary. And I was walking through the neighborhood with my wife, and I thought to myself, why not keep the diary and wrap it around the book? So over a 2-week period, I simply followed headlines because I wanted to make it, the entire book takes place between April 12th and April 22nd of this year. And in order to do that, I took current events. If there was a investigation going on of people who were misusing federal funds that were issued for masks, I put that into the story as a legal side note. And I wrote about Zoom meetings that were taking place, and that people were listening to artists. They were listening to Kenny Chesney. They were listening to Bob Dylan. They were listening to the Dixie Chicks. And I had those three artists juxtaposed beside one another in one of the scenes in April of this year. We have been through such a period of societal evolution and transition in the last 6 months that one of the things happened was that the Dixie Chicks became the Chicks. And when Nicole was recording the book, she came to that page and she said, well, that's not right. And rather than consult the author, thank you, Nicole.
Well, who would do that? Come on.
she consulted the engineer. And so I'll turn the story over to the two of you at that stage as to what happened next.
The producer's guide. I don't know.
Oh, I didn't know that was asked. I thought it was you were going to ask Nicole that first. So to be in full transparency, Nicole did leave me the option of either the Chicks or the Dixie Chicks, and as I was, doing the editing, I was also not blind to the news, so I kind of took it upon myself to say, yeah, this seems what I'd want to be in the finished product. And I didn't know it would be that big of a story.
But you made the command decision to make it accurate.
And it's the one inconsistency between the actual book, which has Dixie Chicks. I never changed it, nor did I ask Matt and Nicole to change the narration. I thought that for purposes of history and as a talking point, it was it's indicative of the times in which we live, that things are changing so rapidly, and they're affecting our sense of culture and our sense of how we define ourselves and one another, that it became just sort of an interesting point to leave it the way it was.
Yeah, and plus, again, you trust the people you work with to make command decisions. So that's fine. Now might be a good time to open things up for questions. I've been seeing questions flash on my screen, but I haven't been able to read them. Can we technically do that? Bring people in to ask questions live now?
Sure.
So who has that? Who can?
Hi there. Yeah, Nora. So what I can do, I'm looking at the chat. I'll try to go in order of the questions that we've been getting.
Okay, great.
So if I missed you, just raise your hand manually. If you guys can all see down there with participants, I think you have a little hand raise icon. So let me just go back up because I think the very first one we got this one is from ETOM 2004 at Yahoo. So I think just for ease, I'm going to go ahead and ask for you, unless you. So for Matt, Derek, and Nicole, how prohibitive would it be for talent or technical to have both a male and female voice as narrative?
Oh, that's a thought.
I can speak from the technical portion, and I didn't know we were going to do this, so I've been trying to answer questions in the chat as we go. My answer was that it's technically you can have as many people as you want. The key to a project like this is not to let it get too unwieldy and last too long, so it never actually gets finished. It's an audiobook is a long-term commitment almost. When you think about the process of, it's an 8-hour book. How long can someone just continuously read? You need days upon days of recording to actually get a final product. And if you have to schedule your main reader and then another day for someone who's going to be doing a couple lines here, then you have to add them in the editing process. That can just pile up and cause delays in the process, and by the time you're finished, you may be on your next book already. So, but technically, anything's possible.
Yeah, it sounds like it might get kind of unwieldy after a bit.
Yeah.
Get too many voices. Actually, I skipped something in my notes. I meant to ask Nicole to do a reading from the book. Is that okay, Nicole? Can you do that? Can you read something from the book?
Sure.
I skipped over that portion in my little notes here.
All right. Well, let me see. I have 2 readings here, so I'll take the first one.
Okay.
Okay, because we are in this format and we've just talked about the chicks, I'm not doing that particular, or the Dixie Chicks, so sorry. let me get into the time machine here of a month, right? Yeah. This is something that we've all lived through. I'm just trying to get the light here. Okay. The entire office held a virtual happy hour on Saturday. Katz's computer screen was filled with images of smiling colleagues, some dressed in exotic costumes. It was a far cry from the somber faces that greeted the all-hands meeting following Hutton's attack. Today, everyone was letting off steam and joining in virtual revelry. Some had missed St. Patrick's Day celebrations, and it appeared likely they'd also be missing Cinco de Mayo. Everyone had missed opening day. Everyone wondered when the baseball team would hoist the World Series banner at Nats Park. Late season skiing trips had been canceled, as well as summer cruises and vacations. They needed something. As Katz watched his staff celebrate, it occurred to him that he had never scheduled an after-hours get-together for his entire staff. In the 2.5 years he had had his position, he had joined small groups after work at local restaurants to discuss cases, but never anything like this. Sure, there were celebrations in the main conference rooms, plenty of them, including a holiday open house when the judges, clerks, and folks from sister agencies dropped over, retirements, showers, and significant milestones like a 60th birthday party. Katz sponsored a barbecue last summer, which was marred by rain, yet this was something special, the likes of which they had never experienced before. 2 months ago, if someone had suggested a virtual happy hour, people would have rolled their eyes. No one even used the video conferencing apps. They all talked about how they needed to transition to a virtual workplace with more teleconferences and teleworking. But that's all it was, talk. No one took it seriously, particularly Katz, who was a bit old school and felt people had to be in the office in order to be productive. Katz believed you needed to sit across the table from other people and look them in the eyes to conduct business. The past month had radically changed his thinking. He was discovering 2 things that had eluded him. First, he could actually observe more on the screen than in a room. The mannerisms of every person participating in a conversation were on display. He could watch them without staring or letting on that he was studying their expressions. The second was that he could multitask on a conference call in ways that were unimaginable in a conference room. All of his files were instantly at his disposal. Proof positive was the way the team was uncovering clues in Hutton's case. Lynn, Santana, and McCarthy had all jumped online and researched items in real time while the group was discussing the issue. Snow, that's his girlfriend, came up behind him holding 2 cups of coffee. We had one of these events the other night. Who would have thought? This just might be the new normal. She put down a cup. Maybe you'd prefer a shot of tequila? He laughed. It's pretty cool. And what's really good about it is no one notices when you leave. Katz was notorious for slipping in and out of meetings and social events. You know what else? She left and then returned with a paper in hand. You can study people in ways you've never been able to do before. Listen to this interview of Alfred Hitchcock with Pia Lindstrom in 1972 about Rear Window. Hitchcock said, "I had to cut out what he saw, then cut back to his reaction. Now what I was really doing was showing a mental process of the man by means of pictures by what he saw." Pretty interesting, huh? That described perfectly how video conferences enable you to study people's reactions in real time. Earlier, I watched the way you looked at the members of your team. You're studying someone's mental process on the basis of their reactions, aren't you? If you're watching me watching them, what do you think I'm doing? You suspect someone on your team of complicity in Jane's attack. He glanced at her, but said nothing. "I'll let you get back to your party," she said. "Just don't stay too late."
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Nicole. Andrea, can we go back to another question or two?
Of course. I'd like Robin Daniels to sort of unmute herself, and because Robin, I'm not quite sure I understand your question, so I'm going to go ahead and let you ask it if you would like. Are you there, Robin?
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, Robin.
I wanted to know the process for copywriting, because this has to be copywritten, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the process says the process is you put a C in your name in the year, and you have now copyrighted it. It's no more complicated than that. Somebody takes my book from me, I will sue them for it. I have now copyrighted my book. Once I have copyrighted the book, I can use it in all formats. I can use it in print, I can use it electronically, I can use it in an audio. And there was another question from somebody, what sort of rights do you give up when you enter into your audiobook? You give up different rights depending on who you go with. Audible and Authors Republic each require you to sign a contract. You retain your copyright as you would with a publisher, but they have exclusive rights to your product for a certain number of years. It can be 5 years, it can be 7 years. It's for a finite period of time, but they become the exclusive agent, if you will, for transmitting it in that medium. So when I go with Authors Republic, I'm surrendering to them the right to have the exclusive right to market my book. It is still my book. I still hold the copyright. I never surrender that. And long term, it all comes back to me. What do I get from them? I get from them the opportunity for that book to travel to Kobo, to Audible, to iBooks, to audiobooks.com, to Google Play, everywhere. And that's what they do. So, and then I get a portion of the price of the sale back at the end of a month or at the end of a quarter, depending again on who you're using. So that's the quid pro quo for it. I think it's a win for the writer. I don't think I'm losing anything long term, and I'm gaining an opportunity to reach an audience that I could never reach on my own. Think back in time. Think back to when an audiobook was a disc. Imagine somebody like me or you being able to do that. It'd be impossible. You couldn't market it. You couldn't afford to produce it in the first place. And then how do you get it out there into bookstores? None of that happens today. It is that far away from you. You can finish this program and go online and listen to Derek McGinty in that Russian voice. And you can go online and follow what Nicole Lacroix is saying. Mo Katz is looking at somebody in his office as a possible conspirator to murder. So take advantage of it. You don't surrender much and you gain a lot.
So do you also follow with the Library of Congress? And how long do you, each company is different. You mentioned 5 years, right?
Yeah, so I mentioned 5 years. I'd have to go back and look at the contract. It could be 5, it could be 7. Those are the two numbers that come to mind when I enter into these arrangements with my different publishers. And I do nothing with the Library of Congress, okay? I personally believe people get too wrapped up in the whole copyright issue, and that becomes an inhibitor to actually doing your book. Don't be afraid to put a C, a circle around it, your name, and the year. That is now your product.
Okay.
Even before I was published, I was sending out my copyrighted material to others to look at. And I have no fear that somebody's going to take that and profit from it. Because if they do, I will sue them and I will get it back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Let's do one more question, and then I would like to move on to James and hear him play the cello.
Sure. Okay, so the next one in the queue, this is from Paula Bach. I'm a volunteer audiobook narrator at the Washington State Talking Book and Braille Library. When my daughter goes off to college, I'd like to try narrating in the bigger world. Tips for breaking in.
Well, boy. Nicole, John, Derek.
I can take that because I did take a course on it. basically, what I learned from the course is you need to get on various websites. I was lucky because John came to me, but if, or I should say when, because this was a lot of fun, I do it again, there's several websites where you can go, and I don't have an up-to-date list because these change all the time, but you can put samples of your voice on these websites. You can also create your own website where you show your various experience. Doing what you're doing is probably one of the hardest things to get into. The Library of Congress, for example, and everything, they're really tough to get into the volunteer narration. So I think that's a wonderful thing that you're doing. Yeah, it's all a question of marketing. And also to have I would recommend having your little studio ready so that when you do get a bite, you're ready to go.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that you not simply market online. When I was looking for my voices, you go online and there are plenty of people out there. You can find them. You just put in audiobook narrators and you will get many, many, many hits. And then you can narrow it down if you want somebody locally, you want somebody nationally, you want somebody who's an actor, you want somebody for this, for that. Not only Nicole, but Derek and Bill Newman, I sought them out. I contacted them. And why did I contact them? Because I heard their voice. And so, and I heard many, many voices online, but I didn't hear the voice I wanted. And I actually spent some time with some folks, very talented folks, but they weren't who I was looking for. So my advice to you would be, find a way outside of marketing on the internet to have people hear your voice. And then just hope that that voice happens to be playing in a coffee shop where somebody is walking with a manuscript in their backpack. I'm serious, waiting to hear your voice. Because in an incredible way, that's actually how it works. That's the magic of the business. And when you actually get into the business, you discover that that's not fiction, that's reality. That's actually how it works. There are incredible creative talents everywhere you look, and they're just bouncing off the walls. And you just have to find the right one that's pointed in your direction and have them find you. Thank you.
I would also add, building on what you said, John, that one way would be to attend writers' workshops or conferences where people can meet you face to face. You know, there's all sorts of big meetings and everything that the writers go to. And if you go along and you talk to people and say, hey, I would like to narrate books, etc., that might be a good way to market yourself. You gave me an idea.
All right.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, now would be a good time to hear from James. We haven't even heard from James yet. James David Jacobs, you around? Are you around?
Hello?
James. Yep,
Hello?
James, there you are. Hi.
Hello?
I've ignored you this whole time.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
This year, I'm used to it. It's fine.
You're a cellist. They ignore you all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
May
so
I say something about James?
please.
I have to say this. James has recorded a set of features on Beethoven that are magnificent. And he's been saying, oh, I wish I had a producer to tell me, you know, to talk faster or slower, pronounce this or that or the other. But he has stayed up 26 hours straight to give us these features on Beethoven symphonies, and they are fabulous. So I just, you know, the level of artistry is amazing, but it does show what you can do when you're working on your own without a producer. Yeah. So I just had to get that work in, James.
I really, really appreciate that, Nicole. But yeah, it's birth of necessity. I've done a lot of work by myself. And in fact, I recorded the music for this by myself in a basement. And it was actually originally intended for another project. It was actually originally intended for a podcast for WAMU that never actually happened. But they asked me, it was about history, and so they asked for certain motifs, and I did those, and they seemed to work for this project as well. So,
well, nothing ever goes unused.
Right, exactly.
You have it in your back pocket. So, when did you start getting interested as a child in music? Correct? That was something that's been a lifelong love of yours.
Yeah. I've always. There's a lot of music in the house. There was not necessarily classical music, but my brother played the bassoon, and so he's sort of introduced the classical music into the household, and I kind of took that and ran with it even more than he did, actually. So, you know, by the time I was 9, I was listening to classical radio, and I was checking recordings out of the library, and then by the time I was 10, I was living in a school district that had a public music program, and I was able to, you know, to use that and play and borrow a cello and start playing the music. And it was amazing. You know, never looked back. It basically saved my life in so many ways.
So you decided what music to use to play on this audiobook.
It wasn't really a decision. It was sort of, you know, basically Nicole said they're looking for this music, and, you know, there was kind of a quick turnaround, and I had this in my back pocket. I had this unused music that I thought maybe, you sort of send examples. You know, one of the things I learned, and this is also important, is that basically there's no such thing as demo tapes anymore. I mean, and what I mean by that is that you have to kind of assume that everything you submit is a product. And that, because that could be, it's happened so many times when I've submitted the thing that I thought, well, this will give you the idea, and it turned out to be the thing. Basically, nobody really has time to sort of get the idea of something. They either hear it or they don't. And that's sad, I have to say, but it's just the reality, and that's been the case in every aspect of my career, that, basically, create stuff, and you have to create stuff kind of for the sake of creating it. And then at some point you may find the right use for it. And that's been the case, it's the cliche of sort of like, you do what you do. If you do something you love for a living, then doesn't feel like work, so and a lot of the stuff that I'd be doing anyway, so including obsessing over Beethoven for 26 hours in a row. So so
well, can you play something for us now?
Well, sure. This history thing, they suggested to me certain suggestions, like they wanted something that sounded like water dripping, and they wanted something that sounded like the waves of history or something, and they also wanted some sort of recognizable, 3 or 4 note hook that could be a recognizable theme. So water dripping, of course, you try to find the most resonant note you can on the cello, because it's not really meant to be plucked so much, but you sort of, can you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
And so you record that, and then you put that on a loop, right? And that becomes your pulse. And that was very helpful for me, because rather than use a click track or a metronome, sort of like, I know my pulse.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so it sort of becomes my whole thing. And then the great thing about the cello is that you've got this vibrating body. It's a perfect demonstration of physics, really, of how sound works, because you have this one note, and then you divide it in half, and it vibrates the same. It vibrates at twice the number of vibrations per second, and then you
Oh.
And you get the sound that's very much like the sound of, you know, the wind through the trees, right? Or plumbing, or an airplane going overhead, because this is a sound that occurs naturally in physics, right? This really is the music of the spheres, and you can use it even if you just use your voice in a certain way, like when you hear that in your own ear. I don't know if you heard that through the phone, but if you go on these elemental, you work with these very primal elements that are based in nature, and you can create this music, as I fond of saying, like, this is my instant Copeland, right? And the cello is so great as a sort of a sound box, and then you try to find some sort of thing that will come, some sort of tune, and it's not, and you generate it sort of like the same way you might generate it. It's like those, when you hear a newscast and there's a motif, and it's not a big elaborate melody, it's just a few notes. And so what I came up with was which was generated by a sort of, I sort of took, I basically, one of the things that I do is I come from words, sort of like if I'm thinking about specific images, I might think of the letters and then associate that with different musical alphabets, and it really helps to kind of create these sort of games, these sort of limitations for yourself, because that's how you get creative, right? Is with limitations, sort of like, okay, so I've got to do 4 notes, and it's going to be these, and then I create something out of that. Because if you just have the whole palette to work with, then it could be great, but we don't have all day.
Right.
Can I say a word here about the use of music in an audiobook for would-be audiobook publishers? Don't be afraid of music. I listened this summer to Shakespeare in the Park, Richard II, and the play was good, but the musical accompaniment was great. And you can listen to the podcast. You can go online tonight or this weekend and listen to Shakespeare in the Park, Richard II. You'll see what I mean. When Nicole mentioned that James had this music, I was hesitant to even listen to it, but I was intrigued, and I've always thought about music in an audiobook. And what he did with his cello, and I think the notes, the tones you heard in the short little depiction, give you a suggestion of how it can work in creating mood. And what Matt Lynch did was Matt Lynch broke it apart, like breaking up an atom, and took little pieces of notes and put them in the right places in the book. And Matt just knew where to do it. There was no consultation. Matt never called me and said, John, I think it should go here, or I think it should go there, or this is the note that I think works best here. He just did it. and so, again, the creative process, you have to trust your creative team that everybody's going to be doing the right thing consistent with the tone of the book that you've created. And so don't be afraid to reach out to James David Jacobs and talk to him about what else he has in his back pocket that you might be able to take advantage of. It will enrich and enhance your work. And frankly, Nicole and Derek, I'm going to mention to the audience as well. These are 2 phenomenal artists, and I don't know what their schedules are. I don't know what your booking is like, but don't hesitate to reach out to them as well. That's how this works, and I think everybody is in it to help everybody else as well. So that's my 2 cents on music.
Well, John, I just want to say a couple of things very quickly. Thank you for the kind words, first of all. Secondly, I'm very jealous that we didn't have any music for our book. So I just wish that had happened, but that's okay. I understand. But it just sounds like it can make a huge difference in the presentation of what you're trying to do. And I will also say it's after 9 and it's past my bedtime, so I'm going to get ready to sign off. But
well,
Derek, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for.
And Derek, we
Sure,
could have
sure.
put music in yours. You had the bass and everything there.
yeah, you remember that. You remember that. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you,
Derek.
Derek.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Nora, if I can, is this a good moment where I can just mention a little bit about the availability of the book?
I
or the
was
audiobook?
just thinking that you're in the commercial zone here. You're
Okay,
telling Nicole and James and Matthew, and so go ahead. Tell if people would like to buy this fine book, this fine audiobook, or both.
So first of all,
how would they
I'm going to mention the audiobook itself. It's on Audible. You can pick it up there if you're so inclined. Also, if you have a favorite bookstore, a corner bookstore that you want to support in this particularly tough time for bookstores, see if they have audiobooks. And the likelihood is that they do. And the likelihood is that they carry Libro FM, Libro.fm. And and I have no affiliation with Libro whatsoever. For people who join, I think you get a couple of free audiobooks and then you can quit or something. So that's an avenue for you to look at. And it does give the bookstore a return on the sale rather than it going to the Amazon affiliate. I'm not knocking Amazon. I'm not knocking Audible. They control the universe for this stuff. And this is a way to support bookstores. Also, there are 2 local bookstores in the DC area, Busboys and Poets and One More Page Books, who have created landing pages for my book. And I think, Andrea, we're able to provide those links. And if anybody wants to order the book from them, I will get the team that we've had tonight to sign the books, because people who get autographed books tend to keep them as souvenirs. Nicole signed a bunch of books for me yesterday afternoon. I will find a way to get everybody's signature on each of your books and have them mailed to you through the bookstore. But we're doing the sales through the bookstores. I'm not doing it individually. Thank you for that.
Okay. Do we have time for another reading from Nicole? Can we do that? Nicole?
It's fine with me. Okay.
Yeah, and then the rest of the time, then, just for your planning purposes, I like to take questions for the rest of whatever time we have left and answer as many as we can.
This is one of my coffee shop voices that I heard, and I thought, oh my God, I'm glad I don't know that person.
Maybe you do now.
And I also thought that it would be appropriate, with the World Series, the Dodgers. As part of the Hutton investigation, McCarthy contacted the local homeowners association, to which I have to backtrack. I used to live off of Slaters Lane, the title of the book, myself. Okay, so I found this very funny. As part of the Hutton investigation, McCarthy contacted the local homeowners association, to which she belonged, a loose federation of property owners in North Alexandria who lived in the vicinity of Slaters Lane. McCarthy sent emails to the SNL board members. SNL stood for Slaters and Neighborhood Lanes Homeowners Association. People took great pride in the name and reveled in the confusion with the popular Saturday Night Live TV show. It reminded him that he needed to check out the videos of the latest SNL show that was recorded remotely without anyone in the studio. The first person to respond to his inquiry was Hutton's next-door neighbor, Kyle Judkis, who contacted him within an hour. As soon as he received the response, McCarthy searched online for information about her. He reached social media sites, Alexandria tax records, and links that appeared on the search engine. In a matter of minutes, he learned that she was single, 38, employed by the National Institutes of Health, graduated cum laude from Boston University, and enjoyed cycling and hiking. He suggested that they do a Skype call, and within minutes, her image appeared on a box on his computer screen. She wore thick, black-rimmed glasses, had a long, thin face, and her hair was matted down. She wore a Nationals t-shirt, red with a white curly W. No opening day, he said. No World Series banner raised either, she replied. The way things are going, they'll be the first team to hold the championship for 2 years based on a single win. That's pretty good, he replied, but I hope you're wrong. They're already playing baseball in Japan with pictures of people seated in empty ballparks. I hear they're trying to reconfigure the leagues and play games in Florida, maybe in empty stadiums. Just so long as they're broadcast on television, I'm okay with it. Having established a personal connection with the interviewee, McCarthy asked her about Hutton. She kept to herself, Judkis said. We didn't interact much. That's pretty much par for the course around here. Everyone does their own thing. No one really pays attention to anyone else's business. We're all too busy for that. At least I am, always on the go, you know. Without further prodding, she added, I only saw her in the morning and in the evening. She gets a newspaper delivered. Who does that anymore? I thought all news was streaming. Anyway, she'd come out to retrieve her paper around the same time I'd be walking my dog. We'd wave. She oftentimes cycled at night around the same time I'd be walking the dog in the evening. She used to go down Slaters Lane to the Mount Vernon Trail and bike into Old Town. Sometimes she'd return with some guy. They'd park their bikes and he'd spend the night. Normally, that was on the weekend. Sometimes it was during the week. There was more. Her mother visited her. The old lady lives right around the corner from Jane. Actually, I shouldn't call her an old lady. She and Jane look alike. People always confuse them. Hey, do you think it's possible someone wanted to kill her mother? Did you know they landed the helicopter right on Slaters Lane to take her to the hospital? Hey, do you know her mother was taken to the hospital the same night? I've never seen anything like that before. Everyone's still talking about it. What else can I tell you? You're doing pretty good for someone who doesn't pay any attention to her neighbors, McCarthy said. What can you tell me about the guy on the bike? What's to tell? It's hard to say what he looked like. He wore a bike helmet. I don't think I ever saw him when he wasn't wearing it. And that was the thing. He would return with her and they'd go inside, usually around the back of the house. It was like they didn't want to be seen together. Sometimes I thought he was a married man. He was well-built, physical, athletic, you know. You could tell from the biking shorts. I believe they had a rendezvous point somewhere along the Mount Vernon Trail or in Old Town. I once followed her down there. You followed her? Listen, I don't want to make myself a witness or anything when they catch the son of a bitch who attacked her, but I was a little curious about the man. So one Saturday, when she went on a bike ride, I ran to my car and drove into Old Town. I saw her stop and meet the guy there. They chatted briefly, no hugs or kisses, which is a little strange, and only confirmed my belief that these were clandestine meetings. They looped around and headed back up the trail. I didn't follow them. I went to King Street and bought myself an ice cream cone. McCarthy jotted down a few notes. I'd like to be able to interview the guy. He might be connected to her attack. You think so? She added excitedly. She suddenly stopped talking. Then she said, listen, I don't want to get myself into any trouble or anything, but I did a little detective work myself about the guy. This was before she was attacked. I visited her house. When? On Easter Sunday, said Judkis. Maybe an hour or two before she was attacked. I thought he'd still be there and that I'd catch them in the act. I was curious as hell to find out who he was because her voice trailed off. Am I in trouble? No, McCarthy said. Good. I swear to you that I did not try to kill that woman or anything like that. You understand? Yes. Okay. I'm going to tell you something else now, and this might actually be important. She paused. I have to go to the bathroom, she said. I usually take the phone with me, but sometimes people are offended when they hear the toilet flush. I'll be right back. She put down the phone.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you very much. So Andrea, with the few minutes we have left, can we do another couple of questions?
Sure. I think we've hit all of the questions that I already saw in the chat, but if you have a question now, I'm going to ask you to sort of unmute yourself and do the raised hand, which I think if you go to the participants. So we're going to freeform it. Does anyone else? I have a question to tide us over. How does it work with international rights? Going back to the copyright, I'm just curious. Have you ever worked with international talent? Is there any change because it's virtual? It's all the same?
Yeah, so I have no information to provide you. There may be someone else on the call or someone else on the panel who has some information, but I've never looked into international rights. If I can capture the domestic market, I'm happy.
Okay. That was my question. Oh, okay. Does anyone else have a question? And I'm going to start calling people.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Nicole.
How did you decide which publishers? I mean, you're rattling off all of these people who are publishing or putting together the audiobooks or the print books. How did you come up with that list?
So Nicole, in terms of the audiobook, Audible and Authors Republic are the two major players in the business. Audible captures the market. People who are on this call who listen to audiobooks undoubtedly have an Audible subscription. What I liked about Authors Republic was the versatility they had, particularly in the ability to get into bookstores with Libro FM. So those are the two names that control the business. And they control the market, because once they publish, you're everywhere. You know, you're, as I said earlier, you're with Google Play, you're with Apple, you're with Amazon, you're with Kobo, you're with Nook. They do all that for you. In terms of the book publishing, I tried to find a name publisher, one of the big companies. You can't do that unless you have a literary agent. And the literary agents, most of whom are in New York, don't care who John Adam Wasowicz is. They are looking at John Grisham, they're looking at James Patterson, they're not looking at me. And I found no success in my repeated efforts to get somebody's attention. So I went online and I went to small publishers, and there are many, many, many of them. You just have to plug in 50 small publishers in the US, and you'll get a list of 50. And I began sending out a synopsis of my first book, Dangerfield Island. And one of the publishers I sent it to was Brick House Books in Baltimore. They primarily publish poets. Clorinda Harris is a publisher. Charles Ramelkamp is my editor. They're magnificent. They're legends in the Baltimore literary scene, and they rejected my book. But when they rejected it, they sent me back a 4-page synopsis of what they didn't like. And nobody else had done that. And one thing about this business is you can't give up. You never give up. You persist, you persist, you persist. So I took their synopsis and I corrected the book consistent with their editorial judgment. And I returned it to them, and they liked it. And I now have published 3 books with them. So that's the way it worked. So I couldn't find a big publisher. You need a literary agent. Nobody was interested in me. There are small publishing houses. They do they do read you. They do hear you. They look at you. And if you're persistent, you'll hook up with one of them. And then in terms of the audiobook, maybe the publisher does the audiobook for you. In my case, they didn't. So I did it on my own. And it's not difficult. There are only 2 major players, and they have standard contracts. And the key is getting your engineer, if I can call you that, Matt, and your narrator. And the publishing is easy. Matt just got the book online in a day, and I work with a woman whose name is Heather at Authors Republic. She told me how many days it would take to get up on Audible, how everything was going, and just saw to it that all of the lights turned green. So that's it.
John, I did have a question. So I've done all the 3 books with you. The first one we did with Audible, and then we went to Authors Republic for the next 2, but they're still on Audible. Was there any downside to moving to Authors Republic, or did you just get the exposure to all the other places plus Audible, which you already had?
Yeah, that was it, Matt. There was no downside. I found that I was getting more exposure. The dollars and cents you get didn't change much. The payment schedule is quarterly, not monthly. With Audible, it's every month. With Authors Republic, it's on a quarterly basis. But in terms of exposure, I didn't lose anything, and I gained something to me that was very valuable, namely the connection to the bookstore. That's what I wanted, because at that point I was doing so many point-to-point sales. I couldn't, to be viable, I had to be able to promote the audiobook in the bookstore. And the only way, so I didn't feel I had the option.
What form does it take in a bookstore? Is it a piece of paper? I can't.
You mean the audiobook? Yeah, so you see, Nicole, your question, no, people can't wrap their heads around how that can work. You could go, when we get off the phone, you could go to Busboys and Poets, and you're going to see all the books on the book racks. And on the margin, it may say audiobooks, and I'll have a book with headphones on it. And if you click on that, it will take you to the Libro site. It actually takes you from Busboys and Poets to Libro. And then you say, well, I want to buy Slaters Lane. And you buy it through Busboys and Poets. They say, who do you want to buy this book through? And because you have entered the portal from Busboys and Poets, they will be in the upper left-hand corner of the Libro FM page. So when you buy the book, the transaction is run through Libro, and a percentage of it is sent over to Busboys and Poets. The same happens with ebooks. You can actually get your ebook now through Hummingbird. And I actually worked with my printer, Book Mobile, in Minnesota. I said, you have to use Hummingbird because I want my books available in ebook from the bookstore. I want to drive my audience to the bookstore. And they hadn't been using their format. They said, come on, why would we do ebooks through the bookstore? I said, because that's the future. And in order for, bookstores are hurting today. You know, there's just an article about in New York City. Some of your major retail companies are struggling. They're down. Some of their sales are down 70%. The ones who are viable are suffering from pandemic fatigue because they've tried every innovative way to keep their audience, and they're still not fully open. So they need the audiobook sale. They need the ebook sale more than the big retailer. As the customer, does it take a little bit more time and effort for you to do that? Yes, it does. So the likelihood that anybody will actually go through with that, listening to me, is unlikely. You're going to get your audiobook through Audible. You're going to get your ebook through Amazon or from Apple. I understand that, but there is another way to do it, and a bit of that profit accrues to the bookstore. So I leave it at that. You know, and I'm all about the bookstore. Since I was a kid, I loved bookstores, and bookstores have been good to me. They welcome me into their door. Most of my sales are point-to-point sales. If you're coming into a bookstore to buy something and you read mysteries or legal thrillers, you will walk out with my book because I connect with you. And so they've been very good to me, and it's my small way of trying to return a favor to them for their generosity.
Okay. We have anything else, Andrea?
No, I don't see anything more on the chat, but I do want to remind everyone that you can email me at andrea@harvardwood.org. If you hang up on the Zoom and then go, that's why I'm here. You can forward your questions to me and I will go ahead and forward to the panelists. And no, this was very interesting and informative and very, we have a lot of interest in this type of self-publishing of work. And I think what's the big takeaway is that, you really just have to do it yourself, but doing it yourself leads you to getting more opportunities to do more. And I think that's so much of what's going on right now. And we do have some feedback, really interesting and useful. Many thanks to all the panelists. And I would echo that. Thank you all for your time this evening. This was a wonderful webinar.
Thanks, Andrea.
Andrea, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your magnificent work in promoting this event, the marketing. Harvard Wood is fortunate to have you and Justin. You are a joy to work with, and it was a fantastic program tonight, in large part to your efforts. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, we look forward to doing more, and we want to do more regional programming. So regional being relative now in this time of COVID. So great. Thank you very much, everyone. And we hope you all have a great night.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Take care.